Thank you and welcome to part 2 of the series. Stevan, just having a focus on the secondary schools and universities in Australia. So how have secondary schools and universities assisted students and teachers with their psychological needs during lockdowns and this shift online? What kind of policies do Australian educational institutions have in place for their psychological counselling during the pandemic?
I think it was similar to what Dr. Chatterjee was saying, is there's just not enough counsellors per students ratios in the schools. So the schools have actually had to rely a lot on external resources. So a lot of referrals to other services, you know, and the government has made some sort of changes to Medicare, allowing sort of more sessions to be bulk billed and so on, so that families are not out of pocket for counselling. That came early on into lockdown, and that has stayed. So I think the main sort of assistance they were providing is actually just, you know, identifying, you know, which students are struggling and referring them and linking them to other sort of supports outside of the schools, because there was no ways the schools could have managed it themselves. Yeah.
Prajita, you're again on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks. So Professor Chakrabarti, to you, online fatigue and loss of motivation have been major issues with faculty members as well. And teachers have been exhausted with ongoing virtual classes as much as students have. So how have teachers managed to cope with their stress of online teaching?
Yeah, this is also true, and very good question, Apurajita. Yeah, this is very true. Actually, we are not habituated to take classes in this mode, and we all thought when it started, we all said, okay, it is just will be for next couple of months. Okay, then it got extended, right? And now everyone is just dying to go to the class physically and try to deliver the lecture, because as you know that we try to understand the mood of the students, looking to their faces, and we try to look into the actions, and we also try to change the story, right? If we find that okay, majority of the students are not getting into my lecture by seeing their faces, either I tone down a bit, right, or I try to present it in a different way, right? Here it is very difficult for us to understand that what is the level of understanding which is going back to the students, and you know that many of the students are not very responsive in the online platform. So some are very responsive, but some are just they keep don't respond at all. Now this is really a fatigue to the faculties, and I don't. So the only way the faculties can do, as rightly said by Tathagata and Stevan, that we are trying to generate innovative ways so that to make the students active in the class in this online, and we try to have intermediate quizzes within the suppose the class lecture is for 45 minutes or an hour, right? We try to make an interactive quiz maybe after 15-20 minutes of the lecture, right? And we try to give them some sort of interesting study, so that they can go after the class, and they can take the support of some digital data available in the public domain and can present the study. So those are the things which a student, but if you say for the faculty side, right, it is still a very that means I don't know what is the way out. That means how the faculty fatigue can be reduced. I am the director of my school, and I have to that means I have a responsibility to guide my faculties in this aspect. But only the thing is that we are having meetings. We are trying to find innovative strategies. We are trying to generate innovative interaction sessions. But that's all, right? But very difficult to completely come up with a solution which will remove the fatigue of the faculties. That means at present I don't have the solution with me.
Dr. Chatterjee, have you had teachers calling in for support during the lockdown, and what were some of the most common challenges experienced by them? Very similar to what Professor's saying, or something more to that effect?
No, I think the professor got it completely on point.
Right.
But I have a lot of, I still interact a lot with my teachers from high school,
Right.
and maybe not on a professional basis, but on a personal level. And some of the things I used to hear, especially at the start of the pandemic last year, things like when Zoom was nothing but how much the how like was a part of the camera, nothing more than that. People had not even heard of Zoom at that point of time, like most
Right.
people, I wouldn't say everyone.
Right.
So of course there were some technological challenges to begin with. Teachers faced a lot of technological challenges, especially in a third world country like ours, where it's not exactly very internet savvy to begin with, and technology. So the teachers had to learn a lot of technology to begin with. At that point of time, I must say that they have done a very commendable job, and most of them are quite abreast with the technology that is being offered as far as education is concerned.
Mhm.
Other than that, one of the things that I see that a lot of teachers, including myself, because I am also an assistant professor at a medical college, we are facing is, the difficulty in interacting and engaging the students. That still remains a huge problem. There is, like Professor Chakrabarti said, there is no foolproof method. This is not something that we have been accustomed to. This is not something that, you can just Google the answer as to what's the best method, because these are very new problems and everyone is adopting as they're going. There is not a exact science, or there's not a foolproof plan which says you do this, you do that, and you're all set. So these are some of the challenges, and the teacher fatigue is real. It's really bad. We do have a lot of teachers coming to us who are entirely exhausted. They are having a lot of pressure. They are unable to cope with that pressure. Uh, so I think Professor Chakrabarti got it entirely on point. Those are just the two things that I would like to add that I did.
Thanks, Dr. Chatterjee. And Stev, has it been the same in Victoria? Have teachers experienced similar levels of frustration when trying to engage with students online? Because this is a shift
Yeah,
for them as well.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
As teachers, parents, you got a whole family working from home. Everyone's fighting for that internet connection, and
Mhm.
it definitely caused a lot of problems. But humans are adaptable creatures. We've all learned to adapt in one way or another, and it's people that were struggling did find ways around it, and they did learn. The main issue remains is that students, they're lacking that motivation, but they're also finding other more sort of prized and other rewards. It's like, hey, am I going to listen to my lecture now? Am I going to watch a new show on Netflix?
Right.
And now I can get away with that because all I have to do is a pre-recording of myself and put it up on Zoom, and in the background actually be doing something completely else. And what has been found is if the family is actually not assisting in this online schooling and monitoring, and encouraging the students with positive rewards to actually engage them in this online learning, the kids just drop out of it. It's not as stimulating. It's not as you're not in that classroom. You're not surrounded by this, and you actually have other options now. You can turn to your you got your school computer, and then you turn to your personal computer and play games instead. So that's what's been happening a lot. Yeah. And teachers just mark the students as present because they see them there on camera, but what they don't realize, what they're seeing is an actual pre-recorded image. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some things don't change, Stevan. So definitely the marking technique,
Yeah.
something that remains, offline and online. Dr. Chatterjee, let's talk about a little bit more, a couple of things more aligned towards the severity of the online education. Now, with your expertise, could continuous exposure to the internet gradually lead to internet addiction? I mean, previously, as Stevan also alluded, that the time spent on the internet could have been curtailed. This was the pre-COVID era, if we can call it that. But since then, even if students are not predisposed to internet addiction, could the online training and the diversions it offers lead to internet addiction eventually?
So there is no doubt that the internet addiction among students and children is on the rise. We get at least 3-4 cases every day that I see that the parents have brought their child, mainly due to the fact that the child remains glued to the mobile phone screen or the tablet or the laptop. Most of the time, somehow or the other, in the Indian household that I've seen, in the middle income kind of a family, that the child mostly is given some kind of a tablet, because the parents are possibly working on the PC or on the laptop, and so the child gets glued to the tablet. And so one of the biggest things that the parents are saying, coming to us, is, of course, we try to monitor the child as to how much he or she is being and using the internet, but of course it's not always possible because they have their own jobs and other chores to tend to. So they are saying that, of course, we believe that the child is using the internet for as much good as possible, but there is no doubt about the fact that they're using it for other things as well. Things like social media, be it, of course, Facebook or Instagram, or just watching random videos on YouTube. The online gaming platforms usage is on the rise, which is kind of worrisome because it gives access to a lot of games which are packed with a lot of violence, which children of all ages should not be playing. The verification process for such games is not very robust, so they can play those games at their will. Um, Another very important thing that I think we should, of course, address is that with the usage of internet and with the incessant access that they're getting to all these devices, the the viewing of pornographic material is also on the rise.
Mhm.
And that is quite worrisome because beforehand, whatever time that the children would spend on a device which had access to internet would be curtailed and would be highly monitored by the parents. But since that is not the case or scenario right now, and they have a lot of access to such devices at any given point of the day, stating things like, of course, I need to do this because I'm either working on a project, or I'm attending school, or I'm attending some kind of private tuition. So of course it cannot be curtailed. And of course, not everyone is using it to the best of their benefit. As good as it is, for the children to be getting such uh, like um, like they're being able to use the internet, it has its drawbacks as well.
Mm.
Thank you, Doctor. Stevan, to you. There are students with learning difficulties, a different cohort, such as dyslexia or ADHD, and those who have a history of psychological issues from traumatic events experienced in the past. So it is important for the vulnerable to have that constant access to their therapist or mental health support system. In that scenario, how has COVID-19 changed the dynamic for students and their parents in lockdown?
It's put a lot of pressure on parents that are already dealing with problematic behaviors, and now they just sort of gave up, in a sense. They're like, oh, just wait for all of this to be over, and then we can send them back to school, and then the school can deal with it, and the school can sort it out. But it's what has happened is a lot of these students have actually fallen even more behind than they already were. It's like if they're already struggling with keeping attention and focusing, just imagine what is it like when you go onto the learning platform. There's no teacher there to gain your focus back, to correct your behavior. It's free reign in a sense. Yeah.
So
and parents were dealing with it initially in the beginning, trying their best, but slowly and steadily they burnt out.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a sad scenario. And Professor Chakrabarti, back to you. Thanks for that. When we try to understand how engagement and motivation levels of both students and teachers are affected by various types of online learning formats, there is a particular notion that synchronous online learning offers students and teachers the kind of collective real-time experience, could be a substitute for the offline on-campus experience. However, the asynchronous mode also allows for better time management and pace, reducing the overall stress of students. So what are your views on getting the right mix, and how should universities strike a balance between these two online modes?
Yeah, so we are trying for asynchronous mode too. Actually, if you see our University of Calcutta, and I think many of the universities and institutes have also started this, we have formed a repository of our online lectures, right? And that is being uploaded to either departmental website through a link, or to the university website directly, to the help of our digital library management system. And that is really needed, because as I think Stevan has also said, and Dr. Chatterjee has also said, that you cannot have the engagement of a student to a digital platform. Okay, cannot be just made a very rule-based type of approach, what we do in normal classroom. And right, we have a it's a session from 10 to 12, and then we have a break, and then we start from 2 to 5. So those things you cannot do in online, because that is a very monotony. So we have to break the monotony, and we have to offer the asynchronous mode. The asynchronous mode will be basically for the interaction purpose. I think but having said so, it's not that means we can step up to that level of asynchronous and synchronous means, but I think ideally it should be that the student can go to the asynchronous mode to collect to know the to get to the lecture, but for interaction purpose and to clear the doubts, right, we should go for a synchronous mode of interaction with the faculty, and that balance should be done. And I think that is the direction we are looking into at present. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Chatterjee, would you say synchronized learning has an overall positive effect on the mental health of students? Are there any other alternatives to dealing with isolation of online education? Considering and following on from what Professor Chakrabarti was saying.
Right. I think Professor Chakrabarti again got it bang on, because synchronized learning has its own set of advantages, but it has its own set of disadvantages as well. Mm-hmm. The advantage is, especially I would think, in the younger children, if who are not exactly attuned to studying by themselves, if until and unless they get called out once in a while, they tend to zone out. They do not tend to put in as much effort and attention in class. Mm-hmm. And like Stevan was saying, if you do things like that, if you can call out a name once in a while, and if they're not responding, and if it's just a image or a video that's being played, one mm-hmm. would tend to know. So it does offer its own set of advantages, but of course it has its own disadvantages as well. Like there's a very common saying in Bengali which says hate panchta angul ek hoy na, which literally translates into the 5 fingers of your hand are not the same. So everyone's pace of learning is not the same either. So mm-hmm. Synchronized learning has that huge disadvantage, of if only a monotony of studying is being done by a teacher who's imparting the education just at a single go, mm-hmm. everyone will not be able to keep up with that pace. So if with asynchronous learning, if a person is able to log in and get the desired material from anywhere at any given point of time, that does help. But I do believe that should be limited mainly to the older kids and people who are in college, who have some sort of sense built into them that this needs to be done, rather than having it only for children, because children generally don't tend to put in as much effort until and unless they're being monitored properly. That would be my take.
Thank you. Stevan, to you, and this is more about the dynamic between families as well, and the kind of support system that families bring about. So positive reinforcements in the form of family encouragement and support usually contribute to the general motivation of students. So more precisely, when you have the support from an older generation, you tend to feel more confident during uncertain times. How have the previous generation reacted to the sudden shift from the traditional learning method to the online transition?
Shock and surprise, I guess. It's like this is all new, sort of, it was like, it was always there, but it was just like shock and surprise, I would say.
Right.
And with the older generations sort of supporting, they've had to sort of really step in there and actually take on this parenting role and supporting the education, because the parents are working. So the older generations were there sort of trying to make sure that the kids are looking at the correct screen and that there's no other sort of distractions, or that they don't have, their other devices distracting them. So I think, they've just stepped into this unknown world and, learned how to manage it. Yeah.
Right. Anything else you'd like to add?
That's pretty much it. I've just, as I was saying, like working with the families, I've seen a lot of, relying on older generations. It's like, oh, can you come over and stay with the kids? We need someone to stay with the kids while we're, working and online in the other room. We don't want the kids to constantly come in and interrupt us, and just taking care of the kids' basic needs. Sometimes the kids would, literally come into their parents' room while they're, working online, and just like, oh, mom, can you make me something to eat? Or dad, what's wrong with the internet? Can you fix it? Or something like that. And all these online interactions. So they were trying to sort of like, okay, let's bring in the grandparents,
Additional support, basically.
Extra additional support. And grandparents have come into this world of online learning going, okay, now we have to learn all this. This is all new and different. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Stev. So back to Professor Chakrabarti. Are parents and family members critical about the overall efficacy of online education, making this worse for students already trying to cope with the new normal? And in the interest of time, we'd like to move on to some recommendations eventually. But Professor, your take on that, have the older generation been very critical regarding the online shift?
They are critical in the sense that this is the first time they are. I think this is happening, though they are connected to the internet, because nowadays that the older generations is also communicating with their kids and with their grandchildren through this online Skype and all these things. So they know this a bit, maybe some section of this, but the problem what is happening that might be towards Dr. Chatterjee and Kevin, Stevan, that and what can happen is that they are feeling that whether the students are whether their kids are getting away from them, the human touch, the personal touch, to this more and more online. Because whenever they are they're trying to interact, they can find that he or she is doing something on the device, right? And that is making a sort of irritation among them in many of the cases, right? And they're feeling that it is going towards not to a very good direction for their social development. So that's the concern which the parents and the grandparents are mainly they are perceiving that type of concern at present.
Sure, thank you. So in the interest of time, let's move on to some recommendations from the three of you. And again, we'll start with Professor Chakrabarti. Are there ways in which university students and teachers can improve the online learning experience going forward, especially as some anticipate a third wave?
Yeah, I think the role of psychological, that means to have the psychological experts inducted in our curriculum to get their help, both for the teachers and the students, right, is obviously a good direction. And institutes and universities should connect, and should try to make the groups, apart from the faculty members, if the students can regularly interact with the psychological counselors, and obviously in the school level, the interaction frequency should be higher, because those are the most vulnerable sector. Right, as they go to college and universities, the counseling is must, but you can have you can fix the frequency accordingly. depending. And secondly, we should have some sort of ways so that the digital inclusiveness, especially for the students, can be managed. This is a great challenge for the universities which are public funded universities, because as we know, the public funded universities, we accept the students based on their performance, not on their financial background. So when we see based on their performance is excellent, but they're losing out in terms of digital literacy, okay, which many of the students having the same type of talent, okay, can just go ahead of the students who doesn't have the digital power. So those type of digital divide, how to take care of those digital divide in the long run, this will be that means a direction which we should take care. Yeah, that's all from my side.
Thank you, Professor. Stevan, what strategies predict better and consistent performance outcomes for both students and teachers involved in online education? Final thoughts?
Final thoughts is, especially with, I'm not sure this will work well with university students, but more with the younger children, is being able to sort of provide them more immediate feedback, and positive reinforcement. So it's something that parents could get more involved with, and finding out is like, okay, my son participated well in online learning today. Give him a little bit of a reward, a little bit of a praise, just a little bit of that ongoing sort of motivation, and try not to focus too much on the negative, rather than, don't, if you focus on, negative reinforcement and so on, you could be actually putting more sort of stress and pressure on the students. But even if there's slight improvement, just praise that, just focus and highlight that, and really shine the light towards that. Then it gives them more motivation to actually move towards more of the positive outcomes. Yeah.
Thanks. And Dr. Chatterjee, final thoughts on how to manage the mindset and the stress of enduring the nuances of online education?
I think, there some suggestions would be, what we already spoke about. There has to be a better mix of synchronous and asynchronous education that is being imparted. Another thing I would love to see is more one-to-one interaction with students and teachers. That I think would help a lot, which is not happening of late. The number of counselor to student ratio needs to be improved drastically.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that there has to be a more open dialogue between students and teachers and parents, as well as counselors, until and unless we help them and hold their hands through this entire process, it can get quite confusing and quite overwhelming for the students. So I think more open dialogues with them would help matters.
Thank you, Doctor. And thank you for your patience, your time and insights. Dr. Chatterjee, Stevan, and Professor Chakrabarti. Hope you enjoyed this session as much as I did. Apologies for the technical glitch, and stay safe, and bye for now.
Thank you.
You all. Thank you.